officially get underway. The clock's ticking and the 45 minutes is not very long to do the kind of thing that we're hoping to get done in today's session. But thanks everyone for coming out to this session. My name's Habib. I lecture in international relations at La Trobe University down in Melbourne, and also teaching to the PDC at Ceres Environment Park as well, looking at social and economic permaculture specifically. So really enjoyed what Robin put together in the last session there. Also involved in the Permaculture CoLab project, which is an attempt to start to organise permaculture at an international level, but without sacrificing sort of the models of horizontal organisation. Yet Robin's going to hand out some of these cards.
Did you these cards on my little stall about the CoLab?
Yeah. So trying to scale up permaculture without sacrificing the horizontal organisation that we like, without succumbing to the type of hierarchical, dehumanising structures that we all know and do not love. That's what we're trying to do in this space. The structure of the session, I'm going to talk just briefly about the project that I've been working on. This is an academic research project that I've been doing at La Trobe University. So I'll talk about that briefly, and then we'll get into some hands-on stuff to give you a flavour for the project and help you to figure out how you connect with the international permaculture movement. So as an international relations specialist, we look at webs of relationships and patterns of interactions at a global scale. These interactions and relationships could be between governments, could involve international organisations like the UN, could involve corporations, could involve non-government organisations, could involve grassroots projects and people like us. And I think it's at that grassroots level that permaculture has its impact globally. So I'm really interested in how permaculture at the grassroots interacts with these larger national and transnational structures. So, of course, as an international relations person, I'm into politics. I'm a politics nerd. But what is politics? Any ideas? You want to throw out some politics definitions? Yeah, Lance.
When two people come together.
Yeah. Exactly right. I think that's an awesome definition. So, politics is more than voting every 3 years. Politics is more than the kind of muppetry that goes on in Canberra and other capitals around the world. Politics, I think, is an inevitable emergent property of relations between human beings, because all relations between human beings involve some kind of power relationship. So I think permaculture has a lot of good things to say about how we manage those power relationships, whether it's between individuals in a group or whether it's between larger entities at an international level. So this brings me to this specific project about mapping permaculture as a transnational social movement. So this research, sorry, can you see? Yeah, I'll stand back a bit. You might need to, actually Sarah, would you be able to just click on the arrow when I signal out? Unfortunately my PowerPoint clicker, the batteries are flat. Techno failure. So this research is informed by 5 major strands of social movement theories. Now, I'm not going to bore you by going into what they are, but suffice it to say that these are the guiding questions that shape the research project. So, for example, what are the aspirations and the grievances that inspire the permaculture movement? So we're not talking about individual permaculturists as such. I'm interested as how our movement functions as one entity, as changing and amorphous as it is at a global scale. What factors open the window of opportunity for permaculture to spread? And permaculture has been quite remarkable in how it's spread from something that developed in Tasmania to something that is in over 100 countries around the world now and is interacting and being cross-fertilised by other social movements, other strands of organic agriculture, etc. This project is interested in who is in the permaculture movement and why. Why are we attracted to be in this movement? How does our movement operate at a global scale? So clearly it does, but we want to understand the mechanics of how that works a little bit better, because that kind of information will help us to scale up what we're doing. And finally, what are the political impacts of the permaculture movement at global scale? So, just a quick intro about the mechanics of this project. It's about mapping out the research that our movement wants and needs in order to make impact at the international level. And channeling what Robin Clayfield just talked about in the previous session, how can we fast-track change at the global level? So we're really taking local impacts to global level. How can we scale that up? How can we engage this great transformation that we need to do structure our societies in a truly regenerative manner? So, to move this project forward, I'm doing semi-structured interviews with permaculture practitioners from around the world, getting people to tell their stories based around a set of broad guiding questions that expand upon those 5 major questions I just showed you. And these stories help to show how the permaculture movement operates at an international scale. These stories will be used like on the academic side in academic publications, but they'll also be used in order to feed back into the movement, to feed back into what we're doing, to try and get the research done that will help us have a bigger impact. So that's enough of me rabbiting on about the project. Now it's time to get you involved. So I'm interested now in you starting to tell your stories about how you feel connected to the permaculture movement at this very auspicious moment in the sort of the great sustainability transition. So if you'd like to just find someone else to talk to, someone next to you, maybe someone that you haven't actually met yet, because this would be a great discussion starter, and take a few minutes to discuss these questions. So in what ways do you or your permaculture organisation connect with other permaculture practitioners? In what ways do you and your organisation feel connected or disconnected from the global permaculture movement? And describe the energy flows and intensity of these connections between you and your organisation and our broader movement. So let's take 5 or 10 minutes in pairs just discussing those questions and see what you come up with. Explore that connection. So I try and do that with my students at uni and they're not nearly as good at paying attention. Thank you. Okay. Very short space of time to have such deep discussions, but I hope that these questions kind of prompt you for further thinking and discussions through the week and beyond. Does anyone want to quickly share anything that came up?
Well, so below that there's a lot that we can do for each other, even though we expect more. Because what the project is involved with links into what we're involved with.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
I actually just think that sharing sort of water system, when you've got international people coming in, you can drop the whole system again, and they can have an experience spiritually and eating food and looking at your diet and so forth, and then taking it back, and I think that's another way to put those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the pictures you saw on the intro slide are from things where we've taken groups of people to other countries in Asia to do very similar things.
Yeah, Rabina and I found that we both work at multi-level national organisations, bioregional and local groups and things intensely in each case.
Right.
I'm aware of the vast inequities that exist in language, access to English, access to technology, access to teachers, access to translations that exist, so that we're trying to talk about the world, but actually there's enormous disadvantage existing there that I struggle with all the time.
My take was that permaculture
movement in Australia is very amorphous and it's very hard to connect other than to individuals. That I don't know that it's feeling that inclusive if you're outside it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just that point on the power disadvantages and hierarchies within the movement, in Australia and internationally as well, something that's come up a lot through the research. So this project has had a run through the IPC in India last year as well, where we harvested a lot of comments.
Let's say, helpful to define movement. I think in Australia, things are very accessible, communicable. But when you look at the global movement, many people don't have internet, they don't have the same language, but there's so much happening on the grassroots, even across the strata, that we don't have a clue about in this part of the world, and it's powerful. So,
yeah, absolutely. So there's a responsibility for people, you know, like me or like you and Ro, who are doing work internationally to be able to share that information so people know what's
can I just correct that and say it should be an exchange of...
Yeah, absolutely.
Friends of I've part of two permaculture organisations. One's like Water Street City Farm. I feel like it's very connected, you know, to the permaculture in Australia, and you know, we've got like 17,000 Facebook fans, and so but all the locals are quite connected. And then I'm part of a smaller permaculture group that did earth building in Nepal, and we actually impacted on the government legalising earth building for structures, municipal structures, but we're really isolated from, like, because, yeah, so it was really interesting, kind of like being part of a well-known organisation that has a large scope locally, but this very small organisation has a huge impact globally.
Yeah, absolutely. Last one, and then we'll move on to the next one.
I haven't been really much part of the permaculture movement for the last 20 years. I've been like that sort of rubble underneath the glacier that sort of moves along with it, hasn't moved dry. But I've been part of the New Economy Network and Co-ops, Commons and Communities Canberra. We've been looking at what's missing from our network. Permaculture's missing. Come and join us. The New Economy Network is having another conference in Melbourne in October. Calls for submissions are open. We need holistic thinkers who can do stuff on the ground. That's the real hole that's missing. But come and join us, and also come and see me connect. I'll give you a card for the audio that's getting recorded for the whole conference.
Awesome. Thanks for that. All right, so we can go on to the next one. All right, so hold what you've just explored in those conversations. The next part is grab a piece of paper and visualise in some way, visually represent how you feel like you connect with this broader movement. So this is when we did this activity at the IPC in December, and these are some of the drawings that came up in that activity. So we're not looking for Picasso's. It doesn't matter whether you feel like you can draw or not, just have a go at trying to represent your connection in some way visually through a drawing. If you don't have paper, Monique's going to hand out some paper here. So take 10 minutes to do this, yeah? Yeah.
What are we doing in this then? Are we going to share it?
So what we can do is we can... Yeah, if you want to share them, like the ones that were shared from the IPC, I scanned and published on my blog and used it for presentations like this. So don't put your name on it or anything, but if you want to share, bring them up the front here when you're finished, and we'll lay them out on the stage so people can come and have a look at them after the session during the lunch break, and then I'll put them online as well if you want to share. But you don't have to share. The point is that you're to do the activity. Cool, thanks. So if you've got something you want to share and put up here on the stage, by all means, bring it up. There's already some wonderful diagrams here. It's really interesting to see the different ways that people represent how they feel this connection to our movement, which is wonderful. All right, so phase 3 of this operation is decoding this information for something useful. What what do our conversations mean? What do these diagrams mean? What do they tell us about the permaculture movement? So these conversations and drawings form the basis for a deeper conversation. So what I'm hoping is that some of you feel sufficiently excited about this to come and do a one-on-one interview with me, where I'll ask you a series of deeper questions about this, and we can really get into the nitty-gritty and add that to the data pool for this project. There's also an online SurveyMonkey version of this, where if you don't want to have a chat, or if you want to share this with people who aren't here, then you can go to the link and fill this in written form. But feel free now to come up here and have a look at these drawings, if you get a chance. So what we're looking for here is any patterns. Do you see any patterns across the drawings? Do you see anything that surprises you from these drawings? Have you learned something new from communicating these ideas in this new way, through this different visual medium?
You want responses, or are they just like questions to the air?
They're both. So if you want to yell something out, by all means. But also these are questions to prompt thinking moving forward as well.
Network intelligence.
Network intelligence, definitely.
Circular patterns.
Sorry, what was that one?
Circular patterns.
Circular patterns, yeah.
Nested systems.
Definitely nested systems. Yeah, absolutely.
Lots of edge.
Yeah, lots of edge.
There's centres. There's patterns that have centres.
Yeah, so there's definitely hubs in these networks, isn't there?
Four elements and cycles of seasons.
Yeah, definitely cycles. Yeah, absolutely. Loads of chaos. I mean, chaos is what we're dealing with on a daily basis, isn't it? We're trying to bring some intention to that chaos. Yeah, definitely potential for growth.
Zones.
Yep. Zones and different scales. That's a really important point.
Trees.
Trees, yep. And what's the significance of the trees, do you think?
One's got many types of trees, like it's not the one type, and the other one's got like one central established tree.
They've got your guild.
Yeah.
One's got a tree in zone 1, big one, and the other's got trees in the outer zone 5. Lots of big ones.
Awesome. So, from looking for these patterns and looking for these connections, is there any way that we can then answer those 5 guiding questions with a bit more clarity? So does this say anything about our aspirations and grievances? Does this say anything about the window of opportunity that's open to the movement to spread and continue its very successful penetration into the consciousness of the world? Does this tell us anything about who's in our movement and how we operate? And most importantly, does this tell us anything about our impact as a movement? Because after all, why are we doing this if we're not interested in having a broader impact, a broader positive, regenerative impact? So these are very much rhetorical questions just at this point. They're questions that the research is going to flesh out. And once we start publishing from this, all of our learnings from this are going to be shared through permaculture circles as well as in the academic world. And also, I teach environmental politics at university as well, so this will feed into that. And I think that's a really important space for permaculture to be operating in as well. Sarah, could you just click the last slide? How are we going for time?
About 5 minutes.
Yeah, cool.
Someone with a red hat should say 5 minutes.
Cool. So here's the details. If you want to get in touch with me at any stage, I'm very easy to find online. If you want to be involved, I'm wide open to recording face-to-face interviews all throughout the convergence, and that's the link down there to the written survey if you'd prefer to participate in that way. But just for the last 5 minutes, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you might have. Yeah, Rebecca.
I have a question, and it particularly comes out of our keynote speech this morning. Can't quite rob me. I am interested in this research and these kind of drawings showing any really conscious, directed, active push towards opening out this network towards Australian Aboriginals. Now, some people in this room are actually doing that, but actually highlighting that to see where the weak links are, to see where the strengths are, and see, if there's like a subset of it, it's going to go into that.
Yeah, that's something I really want to explore through this research, to see where the links are starting to develop. When you remember from the IPC, the big emphasis on decolonising permaculture that was emerging there internationally, and there's some wonderful work going on in that space around the world, and that's something that we could really benefit from in the Australian part of the movement.
I'm concerned with the fact that we don't track our graduates or people doing courses with us to understand the impact of what they're doing, because maybe we should change what we do or how we do it if we had more understanding of the impact. And I know people talk about the teachers, and that's great, but what is it that with one teacher they go and do, and another teacher they love it but more inactive? So we've always stayed with the curriculum, not enough of the impact and how that impact spreads, and what are the keys that we can all use, the indicators that we can incorporate in the projects or in the future.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that there's a session on tomorrow with Lockie McKenzie and I looking at the Permaculture International Research Network and the International Permaculture Educators Network. And those are the kind of questions that those groups, which are part of the CoLab project, are trying to develop tools that we can use to do just that. I don't have great answers at the moment, but that's the kind of thing that both of these projects are trying to fix.
Thanks for your research. Are you thinking of balancing the target group with perhaps a non-converted group, maybe like just an informed group like environmental graduates or something like that, just so that you can get the balance to your analysis?
Not at this phase of the project, but the next phase will be comparing permaculture with other social movements. And there's other related organic agriculture movements like agroecology, and there's really politicised elements of that, like the Via Campesina, peasant farmer movements in South America and elsewhere. And comparing what we're doing in relation to what they're doing, there's some really interesting stuff to be looked at there. And also seeing how permaculture fits with other environment movements. I mean, how many people here are involved in other environmental movements and social justice movements? Yeah, so there's massive cross-fertilisation going on there. So I'm really interested to see how that works and how we fit in with this larger ecology, of environmentalism around the world. Excellent questions. Yeah.
Talking about fitting in with other places or environments, where's that photo taken?
This is in a small city called Yanji, which is the capital of the Korean Autonomous Prefecture in Jilin province of China. So my other research traditionally has been around North Korea and its nuclear weapons program. But from there, that's such a yawningly boring topic, despite what's in the news. So I started doing climate change vulnerability analyses of North Korea and then how they interact with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And now, if there's ever a country on earth that really needs permaculture, it's North Korea. So you'd be familiar with the case of Cuba and how they responded to their special period. Well, North Korea went through the same thing at the same time for the same reasons after the collapse of the Soviet Union, but tried to maintain their old system in a very dogmatic way, and it all went to hell. A famine of more than 600,000 deaths, endemic malnutrition that persists to this day, and the preservation of this political system, which is, we all know about the crimes of the Kim regime. So that's what I was doing up there, was investigating all that work. Yeah, Rob?
I'd love to hear about you using the word movement, because I feel that we are moving, and we could use network. And Bill Mollison at one stage, I know he might have said to me, we've outgrown we used to be like a family, there was, this many of us, and now we're a nation, kind of thing. So I'm just interested in your, using the word movement.
Yeah, well, if we think of it as a network, that's very technical. Whereas a social movement implies that it's something that has political impact and is trying to act in relation to power structures that are dominating and keeping people down. So one question that comes up is permaculture actually a political social movement? Some people say permaculture is not political. It's just a design system. But then many other people, and I agree with this, suggest that, well, actually we're very political because we're trying to redesign the political economy of society, and that's quite a revolutionary act. Coming from that view that everything is political. So when I use the term movement, I mean it in that political sense.
Is that phrase relating to the relation of permaculture is solutions-based? So that there seems to be a need for a lot of solutions to
Yeah, definitely. But solutions, as we know, solutions are locally dependent, based on local conditions and what people need in a given place. So the movement coheres around this design system, but what the interventions are locally are very different according to local conditions. So that's a complication for us. How do you mobilise people around the world when needs are very different and where people are coming from, in all senses of that phrase, are very different? That's why looking at permaculture as an international movement is very interesting, but it's also very tricky because of that diversity.
I want to put out an invitation that there's a better word and there's more than movement, because social movements can fade, social movements can become cults, and social movements can be suppressed. And I think permaculture is probably already more than a movement, and that people within permaculture quite often blog these days about saying permaculture should or should not do this. There's this impression, the way people write about it, that permaculture is this one uniform thing. Toyota should have a policy on health and safety. Permaculture should have a policy on equality. I'm annoyed by those general statements at one point. The other is that I don't think movement or network is a good enough description yet. But because I don't have the answer, I'm inviting that to be an ongoing discussion.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would never stand up here and say that the permaculture movement is everything that is permaculture. Yeah, I think of it as this is an expression of what we as practitioners, when we mobilise as a group, this is the kind of outcome of that.
Permaculture evolution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I so agree with Ian, and I cringe when I hear the word movement. I always have, because it implies they're going in one direction. As Bill said, there are as many permaculturists as there are permaculturists, and we go in different and opposing directions, and we have to look at each other with love and say, I totally disagree with what you're doing, but maybe the end is right, and I'll leave you to be.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, but I would locate that thought in a bigger context that the whole world is going through this sustainability transition at the moment, and for a whole host of reasons that we're all very familiar with, and that's kind of giving a push towards the need for the kind of regenerative thinking that permaculture provides. But permaculture is just a design system, right? So what it looks like on the ground is very different everywhere. So yeah, I want to stress, the permaculture movement is not permaculture, it's just this broad collection of people who are trying to practice the ethics and the principles and use of the design system to solve their problems. but within the context of this broader need for regeneration.
I've got a meditation on the semantics of the word movement. And, you know, when I talk with farmers about leaving country in a better condition, they have different ideas to me. And when we talk about movement, we can be frustrated by the word if we think it means something than the speaker thinks that it means. I worked for the Green Party for 10 years, it's part of the movement. But there's all sorts of people who are part of the environment movement. Earth Firsters, Worldwide Fund for Nature, Greenhills. So I feel like the word movement works because that's my conception of it. I just invite people to think about their conception of the word.
And that question in those slides that I put up there before about who is in the movement, that really, you know, encapsulates what you're talking about there. Who's in it and why, and what part do they play in this big blob of permaculture? Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that permaculture is both a social movement, but also a network, you know. A network refers more to its external structure, and a social movement is about its environmental and social impact and its work there. I think it's very political, you know, having worked in local government, both inside government, in policy, and also as an advocate for a community. With permaculture, when you apply permaculture using its word, that word is not, it's actually very political if you're trying to do through the local or the state government. And you do that, you are very much involved in politics, including politics of the conventional kind, as well as any idea of the community politics we have. So I think permaculture is about change. As soon as you start talking change, you're going to have people who oppose it. And we're going to have to deal with it. So permaculture to me is a very political.
Yeah, absolutely. But approaching those discussions with love, like Bruce mentioned this morning, really important and so hard to do. We're not trained to, you know, have disagreeing conversations with love and empathy, so we've got to cultivate.
That's why we need people more effective facilitators.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just really happy to actually see that there's research being done, because I think it's been really lacking. You know, as a newbie to the permaculture world, whatever you want to call it, a movement, you know, a collaboration of awesomely like-minded people. You know, like I've only been in the, you know, deal for like 10 years, but we need people like you to do this research, to get it out to the universities so that, you know, people don't just think we're all hippies living in the hills growing vegetables. You know, we need to, like, you know, get it into the new age and, you know, really just make it, whether you call it permaculture, whether you call it a movement, whether you don't call it permaculture at all, as long as you're getting the ideas, the ethics and the principle out there in whatever way, I think, you know, it's well done.
Thanks. It's doing the work. We're getting to hurry up, so one more question, Ravina.
It's really a comment. Okay, I'm concerned that this research is kind of skewed to be Australia-centric, and you talk about the global movement. I think it's helpful to differentiate, because the global movement has like 100 different colours and applications, and Australia also does, but it's more, you know, it's got more than one tone. And if it could be, you know, sort of somehow clarified, I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. It's something I'm conscious of. I have got and continue getting respondents from everywhere, so it's not just here.
Presented in the research like that.
Yeah, definitely. You know, when you're doing this kind of research, you know, you've really got to be conscious of that kind of thing. But I'm definitely, like, if you've got feedback on actually how this is structured, yeah, I'm happy to take that on as well. I'm not wedded to any particular structure. The work needs to be done, and I want to do it as well as possible. Yeah. All right, Russ, get one in.
Just 10 seconds. The CoLab actually did a global survey of who's in permaculture and what it is. And the problem with that was it didn't access a lot of people in developing countries other than Africa. So it's partial, but it's actually available online, and it's a property survey in federally noted. I'm not sure if it's on the CoLab website. It's on my website, Pacific Edge, but
That was more about education and culture education, wasn't it?
Oh, it's about a whole lot of stuff, yeah.
It's on the plans for a future website as well.
Yeah, great. If you know anyone within your networks in Australia and around the world who you think might be interested in participating, send them the link to the survey. That would be amazing. And the more people that feed into this, the more refined and sophisticated.
Can you put this survey link on the Facebook page for this event?
I already have. I did it
Great.
a few
Are we
days
on the
ago.
website?
Yeah, spread it far and wide, as liberally as possible.
And I just searched on Ben Habib, Survey Monkey, and that found it. Remember that.
Yeah, like this. Hey, what?
Understand. This will be continuing.
Yeah.
In our talk.
Yes. Yeah. What time are we unlocking tomorrow? At some point in daylight hours tomorrow, Lockie and I are talking about the research and education. Now, thank you so much for coming and participating today.